It was late on a misty Thursday when my life was shuffled like a deck of cards. Rain streaked down the floor-to-ceiling windows of my corner office, blurring the lights of the city and turning the harbor into a gray watercolor. I was standing there in my tailored suit, a cup of coffee growing cold in my hand, when my phone buzzed against my desk with a single dismissive vibration. Before diving in, let me ask you a favor. Please like this video and listen to my story till the end and let me know which city you're listening from. That way, I can see how far my story has traveled. The journey you're about to join me on is filled with unexpected twists, and your encouragement keeps me going. I glanced down at the screen, only to see a message from my dad. The preview alone twisted my stomach. Vanessa and Ethan are hosting this year. We think it's best if it's just immediate family. Ethan's parents are extremely upscale. We don't want you to feel out of place, and honestly, we want to avoid uncomfortable questions about your situation. It might be awkward for everyone. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because of the bitter irony. Then, as quickly as the chuckle bubbled up, a wave of sadness washed over me. The word awkward sat on my tongue like poison. For my family, awkward wasn't a social mishap. It was code for me. They had always preferred to brush me aside, to treat my life like a dull aside while my sister Vanessa shone like the sun. In their eyes, I was just Lila, the quirky one who messes with computers. They had no idea that those computers were the backbone of Nexus Flow Systems, the cutting-edge logistics AI company I had built from scratch. They didn't know I had just closed a Series C round that made my company worth 9 figures. They didn't know because they never asked, and I had learned the hard way that respect begged for is nothing more than pity. So, I typed 2 letters back. Okay. No explanation, no emoji. Just 2 letters and a decision to remove myself from their script. The haptic buzz of my phone became the sound of a door closing. Inhaling deeply, I tried to steady the tremor that threatened to crack through my calm exterior. I had taught myself to stop shaking years ago. Now, instead of shaking, my hands balled into fists as I imagined my parents smiling politely at Vanessa and Ethan's table while I disappeared to spare them the shame of introducing me. The ache was so heavy it made my eyes burn. That's when Zane, my executive assistant, sharp, organized, and barely out of his 20s, knocked gently and stepped into my office, tablet in hand. "We have the final red lines from legal on the Ratcliffe contract," he said, excitement thrumming under his calm voice. "They want to sign next week, but there's a catch." I moved over to the conference table, my mind snapping into business mode with relief. On the screen was a tangled spiderweb of supply routes. Ratcliffe Logistics, a conglomerate based out of Colorado, was hemorrhaging money due to outdated systems. Their trucking division was running at 60% efficiency, and they were burning $2 million a week. Solving chaos like this was my specialty. My software didn't just report where things went wrong. It predicted it and made decisions before the storm hit. Fixing Ratcliffe's mess would bring an 8-figure fee and years of recurring revenue. "They want a face-to-face," Zane continued, his tone faltering. "Not with sales, not with the chief technology officer. They want the architect. Their CEO, Charles Ratcliffe, is old school. He wants to look the brain behind the system in the eye." The name Charles Ratcliffe hit me like cold water. My heart skipped and then hammered. Charles Ratcliffe wasn't just any CEO. He was Ethan Ratcliffe's father, my sister Vanessa's wealthy, revered father-in-law. The same man my dad was so desperate to impress that he'd just asked me to stay away from Christmas. My breath hitched as laughter bubbled up again, this time bitter and almost hysterical. What were the odds? The man my family had insisted I avoid to save them embarrassment was about to walk into my office to plead for help. In that moment, anger hardened into resolve. "Schedule a meeting," I told Zane. "Monday morning, 10 sharp." He hesitated, probably sensing the storm brewing beneath my calm expression. "Lila, are you sure?" "Oh, I'm sure," I replied, smoothing the lapel of my blazer. "I think it's time the Ratcliffes learned who they're doing business with. What would you do if the very people who dismissed you suddenly needed you? Drop your thoughts below, and don't forget to tell me where you're watching from." As Zane left to finalize the details, I turned back to the window. Outside, Seattle's drizzle blurred the lights, but inside me a different storm was brewing. The universe truly had a twisted sense of humor. My family thought I would embarrass them. On Monday, the most powerful family in their social circle would discover that the awkward daughter they tried to hide held their future in her hands. If you think that's juicy, just wait until you hear what happened next. It's going to be a roller coaster. By the time Friday turned into Sunday, my penthouse looked less like a home and more like a war room. Schematics of Radcliffe logistics were spread out over every surface, stacks of paper covered in my notes, digital displays glowing with data models. Yet, whenever I paused to think, my mind drifted backward, through decades of small slights that had led to that text message. Those memories didn't hurt, they burned. Growing up, my family had been a stage, and each of us assigned a role. Vanessa was cast as the golden girl from the moment she could walk. She knew exactly how to laugh at the right jokes, how to tilt her head when someone was speaking, how to make every room feel like sunshine. She learned to curtsy while I was busy taking apart the toaster to see how the coils worked. She learned to bat her lashes while I learned to write my first lines of code. Ha! There was a time she teased me about the way I'd stay up late debugging instead of going to the prom. For our parents, her charm was currency, and I was the misprint on the invitation. At school, while Vanessa was being crowned homecoming queen, I was in the computer lab teaching myself about neural networks. At home, my mother would gush over Vanessa's dress fittings and dating life while patting my hand and saying, "Lila, honey, you make things so hard." The word stubborn was thrown at me so often it became part of my name. They called me stubborn, but what they meant was independent. They didn't know how to handle someone who saw through their rituals and asked uncomfortable questions about finances and fairness. That dynamic calcified when Vanessa married Ethan. Their wedding, held at a vineyard in Napa, cost more than most people earn in years. I was there, technically, but not really. I remember standing near the kitchen doors at table 42, the aroma of garlic and salmon wafting over me as I watched my parents bask in the glow of their new affluent connections. My name card was next to an elderly aunt who kept asking if I was one of the catering staff. Ethan's father, Charles, was there. He shook hands, clinked glasses, and never once met the other daughter. 10 feet away, my parents gushed about how Vanessa made the perfect match. At one point during that lavish evening, I tried to approach the head table to congratulate my sister. I was intercepted by my mother, who gently pressed her hand against my shoulder. "Not now," she whispered, eyes darting nervously towards Charles Radcliffe and his wife, Margaret. "We don't want them to ask uncomfortable questions about your job." I retreated to table 42, slicing into chicken that tasted like sawdust while blinking away tears. That memory used to make my chest ache. Now, it just made me determined. On Saturday evening, while I was circling supply chain inefficiencies with a red pen, I remembered a conversation in the ladies' room from that wedding. Vanessa stood at the mirror reapplying lipstick. Seeing me in the reflection, she smiled that tight, perfect smile. "I'm glad you're here," she said, voice dripping honey. "But try to keep a low profile tonight, okay? Ethan's parents can be discerning. I don't want you to feel overwhelmed." Back then, I thought she was being condescending. Now, with the benefit of hindsight and the text message she sent pretending to be our father, I realized she had deliberately been hiding me. Not because she was embarrassed by my struggles, but because she was terrified of my success. She had built her identity around being the successful one. If I stepped out from behind the curtain, her spotlight would shrink. Sunday morning, the weight of the coming meeting pressed on me as I triple-checked every projection and every line of code. We were going to save Radcliffe from bleeding out millions, but that wasn't what buzzed in my veins. It was the impending collision of my two worlds. Would Charles recognize me? Would Ethan? Would Vanessa be there? If you've ever felt like the outsider in your own family, let me know in the comments. Did you carve out your own space like I did, or are you still searching for it? Your experiences keep me going. Before I left the office that night, I sent Zane one last instruction. "Make sure my name is plastered across the welcome screen in the lobby," I said, my voice steady. "Big letters. I want it impossible to miss." He grinned, sensing the shift. "You're going to make a statement," he said. I shook my head. "No," I replied, taking a breath that felt like inhaling electricity. "I'm going to make a correction." By the time I closed my laptop and shut off the lights, the air outside had turned crisp and the drizzle had given way to a downpour. As I looked out over the shimmering city one last time, a reckless idea formed in my mind. What if this wasn't just about business? What if this was the beginning of something bigger, a chance to rewrite my role in the family narrative, where the boardroom becomes a stage and long-kept secrets are forced into the light? Rain hammered against the glass as Monday dawned, the sky a slate gray that matched the suits hanging in my closet. I dressed deliberately, choosing a navy suit with sharp lines and a silk blouse in smoky gray. I looked like a knife hidden in velvet. My hair was pulled back in a low knot. I wasn't dressing to impress. I was dressing to command. When I arrived at Nexus Flow's headquarters, the lobby hummed with tension. My team, Marcus from finance, Sarah from engineering, and David from legal, were already assembled. They knew we were about to face a behemoth, but they didn't know the personal stakes. At 9:55 a.m., our receptionist buzzed. "They're here," she whispered. My pulse didn't quicken. It steadied. This was my arena. With each step down the glass hallway, I steeled myself. On one side, the harbor churned. On the other, digital screens cycled through our patents and press coverage. As we approached the conference room, I could see the silhouettes of 4 people through the frosted glass. I opened the door. Standing on the other side were Charles Radcliffe, silver-haired and imposing, Margaret Radcliffe, a woman whose eyes missed nothing, their chief operations officer Arthur, and finally Ethan, my brother-in-law, fiddling nervously with his cufflinks. None of them recognized me at first. Charles extended his hand. "Miss Carter," he said warmly, "I've heard extraordinary things about your algorithms. It's a pleasure to finally meet the architect." "Mr. Radcliffe," I replied evenly. "Welcome to Nexus Flow." Ethan's head snapped up at the sound of my voice. He stared at me like he'd seen a ghost. Recognition flickered, and then died behind his eyes as he tried to reconcile the woman in front of him with the blurred figure at the back of his wedding photos. He swallowed hard. "You look familiar," he stammered. I gave nothing away. I didn't mention the vineyard, the kitchen doors, or table 42. I gestured to the seats. "Please let's sit," I said. "There's a lot of money to save you." We plunged into the meeting, my voice calm and precise as I tore apart Radcliffe's supply chain inefficiencies. I didn't just show them numbers, I told them stories. I painted images of trucks idling for hours, of shelves filled with inventory nobody knew was there, of cash burning like kindling every time a shipment took the wrong route. "Waste is a choice," I told them. "My software helps you choose differently." Halfway through, as I tapped my thumb against my forefinger, a nervous habit I've had since childhood, Ethan's eyes widened. He stared at my hand, then at my face. I watched realization dawn slowly, like a sunrise. He blanched, glanced at his father, then at me. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. When he finally found his voice, it cracked. "Do you have a sister?" he blurted. The room fell silent. My team looked confused. I met Ethan's gaze without blinking. "Yes," I said. "Her name is Vanessa." Charles frowned, clearly annoyed by the personal tangent. But Ethan couldn't let it go. "Vanessa, my Vanessa?" he whispered. He looked like he wanted the floor to swallow him. Charles turned between us, eyes narrowing. "Wait," he said slowly. "You're related to Vanessa?" "I'm her older sister," I replied, letting the weight of the words hang in the air. "The one who sat by the kitchen doors at your wedding." Margaret gasped. Arthur looked uncomfortable. Ethan sank back in his chair, face drained of color. Charles's features hardened, lines deepening as he processed what that meant. In an instant, the power dynamic shifted like a tectonic plate. I wasn't just a vendor. I was family. And the family he thought he knew had hidden me away like a shameful secret. His eyes flicked to the contract, then back to me. "Why didn't they tell us?" he asked quietly. I shrugged. "Perhaps they thought it would be awkward," I said, unable to keep the bite out of my voice. We wrapped up the contract details, but Charles didn't slide it back immediately. Instead, he capped his pen and folded his hands. "I have a condition," he said. My team stiffened. I narrowed my eyes. "We've already agreed on the fees, Mr. Radcliffe," I replied. "What more do you want?" He leaned forward, voice lowering.
"Dinner," he said.
"With your parents, your sister, and Ethan. Before Christmas. I want to see for myself what kind of people I'm partnering with." My jaw clenched. He was testing character, not code. It was cruel, but part of me, a part fueled by years of being erased, wanted the same thing. I nodded slowly.
"Fine," I said.
"But on my terms. Neutral ground, not my home. You introduce me as Lila, not as a CEO. If they're going to see me, they're going to see me as a person first." Charles smiled, sharp, almost predatory. "Done." He signed the contract with a flourish. After they left, my adrenaline crashed. I paced my office, the contract cool in my hands. My phone buzzed with a message from Ethan. "Lila, I swear I didn't know. Please tell me how to fix this." My response was curt. "You don't fix it. You show up on Tuesday and tell the truth." He read it, then looked up at me through the glass wall with the expression of a man realizing his safety net was in flames. But something else gnawed at me. The text that had sparked this chain reaction fell off. My father never used words like upscale. He called rich people fancy or loaded. He'd been at his weekly poker game when the message came through, no signal down in the community center basement. I couldn't shake the suspicion that he hadn't sent it, that someone had typed it on his phone, using his voice to deliver the blow. On a hunch, I had Zane send a harmless invitation to my parents' email with a tracking pixel. When the notification came back, it wasn't opened on an old desktop in our hometown. It was opened on an iPhone 15 Pro Max in the upscale suburb where Vanessa lived. My heart went cold. Vanessa hadn't just uninvited me. She had impersonated our father. She had hijacked his voice to exile me. Have you ever discovered a family member went behind your back in such a calculating way? Share your shock, or your relief, in the comments below. I promise to read every story. By the end of the day, my resolve had crystallized. Tuesday's dinner wouldn't just be a meal. It would be a reckoning. I didn't have to set the trap. Vanessa had dug it herself. All I had to do was stand back and watch the truth fall in. Where dinner is served with a side of justice and decades of resentment come pouring out. The private dining room at the Lakeside Club looked like something out of a period drama. Dark wood paneling, a roaring fireplace, velvet drapes that muffled the outside world. There were only 10 chairs around the polished oak table, and I had taken the one directly facing the double doors. My heart thudded at a steady rhythm that belied the electric storm in my head. Marcus had texted me earlier. "Want backup?" I'd said no. Tonight wasn't about my company.
It was about my life.
At 7 sharp, the doors opened. My parents walked in first. My father wore his best suit a little too tight across the shoulders and polished shoes that creaked. My mother clutched a pearl necklace at her throat like a lifeline. They stopped dead when they saw me. "Lila," my mother whispered, her voice cracking. "What are you doing here?" Before I could answer, Charles and Margaret Radcliffe entered from the terrace with Ethan and Vanessa behind them. Vanessa looked stunning in a green silk dress, her smile bright, choreographed to perfection, until her eyes landed on me. She faltered, the smile freezing, the mask slipping. Ethan looked like a man on the edge of a cliff. "Frank, Karen," Charles said warmly to my parents as he shook their hands. "So glad you could join us. Lila is our partner on the Radcliffe project. Haven't you heard?" My father's face registered confusion, then denial. "Partner?" He chuckled nervously. No, Lila works in tech support. Vanessa told us." Charles's expression hardened. "Your daughter is the CEO of Nexus Flow Systems," he said, voice cool as steel. "She just signed a contract with me worth $12 million. She's not fixing my laptop, Frank. She's rescuing our corporation." My mother gasped, hand flying to her mouth. My father stared at me as if a stranger had taken my place. Vanessa's knuckles whitened around her wine glass. Ethan shifted uncomfortably. I could feel the weight of their ignorance pressing into me, and for once it didn't crush me. It enraged me. Margaret leaned forward, eyes glinting. "Karen," she said sweetly. "Last week when you said Lila's situation was awkward and that she might embarrass us, what exactly did you mean?" My mother flushed crimson. We just meant she's private," she stammered. "We didn't want to overwhelm her." "Overwhelm," I echoed, raising an eyebrow. "I lead a global tech company that prevents supply chains from collapsing. Trust me, a family dinner doesn't overwhelm me." A nervous laugh escaped from somewhere around the table, then died quickly. I pulled out a folded piece of paper and slid it into the center of the table. "Dad," I said, my voice calm but razor-sharp. "You play poker every Friday afternoon in the basement at the community center. There's no cell service there. And you've never used the word upscale in your life. You call people fancy or rich. So tell me, who sent that text?" My father stared at the paper, an annotated printout of the text message with a log of my email tracking data, and then up at me. His mouth opened and closed. He couldn't lie in the face of evidence. He looked at Vanessa. "Did you?" he started, but his voice broke. Vanessa slammed her palms on the table, tears springing to her eyes. "Fine," she hissed, her voice cracking.
Yes. I sent it.
"I typed it on Dad's phone because I had to. Do you have any idea how hard I've worked? How careful I've been? I've spent years fitting into the Radcliffe world, making sure everything is perfect. And you," she pointed at me, the fingers shaking, "you waltz in with your messy hair and your old car, and you don't care about any of it. I couldn't risk them judging me because of you." I stared at her, emotions colliding inside my chest. There was anger, yes, but there was also a deep, aching sadness. Tears pricked my eyes uninvited. Weeping would have been easy, but I held my ground. "You didn't do it to protect me," I said softly, my voice barely above a whisper but slicing through the tension. "You did it to protect your narrative. You needed me to be small so that you could be big." Charles's voice cut through her sobs like a gavel. "Vanessa," he said, tone now cool and almost pitying. "We knew who Lila was. We do our research. We assumed you were humble, not hiding your own sister. You wanted to be perfect, but all we see now is deception. In my world, trust is currency. When you fake anything, especially family, you become a liability." Margaret set her wineglass down and reached for her clutch. "And in the Radcliffe family trust," she added, her voice gentle but deadly, "any beneficiary or spouse who engages in deceit or conduct damaging to the family's reputation can be removed." Vanessa's face drained of color. "Removed," she whispered. Ethan's jaw slackened. His eyes went wide. Suddenly, the stakes became clearer than any number on a contract. I could have watched my sister lose everything she had clawed for. I could have nodded and let the bylaws banish her from the Radcliffe fortune. Instead, exhaustion washed over me. Revenge would change nothing. It wouldn't heal the girl in me who had stood by the kitchen doors at table 42. It wouldn't make my parents proud. It would just prove that I could be as ruthless as Vanessa feared I was. So I took a breath and made a different choice. "No," I said firmly, looking at Margaret. "Don't invoke your bylaws on my behalf. I don't want Vanessa cut off. I don't want her homeless. I just want honesty." I turned to my sister. "You owe me an apology. Not here, not as a performance. A real one. You owe our parents the truth about who typed that message. And you owe yourself the chance to drop the act. Stop using my existence to prop up your image. Start seeing me as I am." Vanessa sniffled, tears dripping onto her perfectly manicured hands. "I'm sorry," she whispered, genuine fear trembling underneath the words. "I didn't realize what I was doing to you. I was so busy protecting my fantasy that I lost my sister." My father watched the exchange, shame etched across his features. He opened his mouth to speak, but I held up a hand. "Dad," I said, "you let it happen because you were afraid. You didn't want to lose your seat at the table. You thought if I sat there, people would think less of you. That's your burden to unpack. I'm not doing it for you." He nodded, a sob catching in his throat. Charles leaned back, satisfied for the moment. "We will host Christmas Eve at the Mountain Ridge Resort," he said. "Everyone is invited. No masks, no roles, just truth. If you show up as yourselves." He looked at me. "Lila, I hope you'll be there as my partner and, yes, as family." I didn't answer. Instead, I gathered my things and stood. "Thank you for dinner," I said politely. "The halibut was lovely." My voice wobbled on the word lovely, and I covered it with a cough. "But I have a company to run. Would you have let your sister face the consequences of her lies, or would you have offered mercy like I did? I really want to hear your take, because that decision haunted me for a long time." I left the dining room with the weight of 3 decades lifting from my shoulders and another weight settling, the knowledge that I had just set boundaries for the first time. The next test would come on Christmas Eve, because the finale will change everything you think you know about family and what it means to be elite. Snow fell in soft, fat flakes on Christmas Eve as our convoy wound its way up the mountain road to Mountain Ridge Resort. The pines bent under the weight of fresh powder, and the entire world seemed hushed, waiting. I wasn't in a rental car this time. I drove my own matte black coupe, and behind me were SUVs filled with the people who knew the real me: Marcus, Sarah, and the rest of the Nexus Flow team. We laughed as we recapped bugs squashed and contracts signed. They weren't blood, but they were my family. The resort itself was a cathedral of timber and stone. A massive fireplace roared in the lodge, casting flickering light on a towering fir tree draped in crystal ornaments. At the entrance to the private ballroom, a sleek sign glowed in discreet letters: "Ratcliffe Holdings welcomes our strategic partner, Nexus Flow Systems." Beside the text was my portrait, the same one that had graced the cover of Business Quarterly. Arms crossed, gaze steady. Seeing my face there made me exhale with something like pride. Ha ha ha, if my younger self could have seen this, she would have burst out laughing and then dissolved into happy tears. Inside the ballroom, the lighting was low and amber. This wasn't a raucous holiday party. It was a gathering of people who moved economies. I sat with my team at a table near the front. We toasted quietly with champagne. At 7:15, my parents and Vanessa walked in. They stopped dead when they saw the sign. My father's mouth fell open. My mother's hand flew to her pearls. Vanessa's eyes darted around the room looking for an anchor. They weren't late because of traffic. They were late because it had taken them that long to work up the courage. Charles escorted them to a table directly next to mine, ensuring they'd be front and center when he spoke. Grant stood as they approached, but he didn't embrace Vanessa. The emotional distance between them was a chasm. Ethan looked at the floor, guilt written all over his face. Vanessa's chin trembled, but she kept it lifted. When Charles took the stage, the room hushed. He spoke about partnership, about the future, about how Nexus Flow and Ratcliffe would together redefine global logistics. Then he turned toward my father. "Frank," he said kindly but firmly, "will you stand?" My father pushed his chair back slowly. In front of 50 of the richest people in the room, he looked small. "You told your daughter not to come tonight," Charles said, his voice traveling without a microphone. "You were afraid she would embarrass you. Looking at her now, at what she has built, what would you like to say to her?" My father's eyes overflowed, tears spilling down his weathered cheeks. "I was scared," he admitted, his voice cracking. "I let Vanessa send that message because I thought if Lila came, people would look down on us. I'm sorry. I let my own insecurity erase my child. Lila, I'm proud of you. I should have said it sooner." It was as though the whole room exhaled at once. He sat, sobbing quietly. My mother reached for his hand. Charles then turned to Vanessa. Without waiting, she stood, voice shaking. "I was jealous," she confessed, tears streaming freely. "I wanted to be the one everyone admired. I thought if people knew you, they'd see me as small. I lied. I used Dad's phone. I'm sorry." Ethan looked at her with an expression that was equal parts heartbreak and relief. Maybe there was hope for them after all. Everyone's eyes fell on me. I took a breath. "There's no neat ending here," I said. "What happened hurt. It doesn't disappear because you apologized. But this," I gestured around the room, This is truth. It's messy and it's uncomfortable, but it's real. If we keep choosing real over perfect, we have a chance. Charles raised his glass. To redefining elite, he said, it's not about money or clubs or curated lives. It's about integrity, about how you treat people you think are beneath you. And until tonight, many of us at this table failed that test. Let's do better. Applause broke out, not raucous, but sincere. Plates were served. The contract was signed publicly. Marcus whispered a joke that made me snort into my champagne. Haha, that felt good. Eventually, after polite conversations and many congratulations, I stood and gathered my things. You're leaving? My mother asked, her eyes wide. Already? Yes, I said, smiling gently. Global logistics doesn't stop for Christmas. I have an early flight. I hugged her briefly. She clung to me like she was afraid to let go. Vanessa touched my arm as I passed. Merry Christmas, Lila, she said, her voice raw. Merry Christmas, Vanessa, I replied. I meant it. I couldn't promise we'd ever be close, but I could offer grace. I walked through the lobby, past the enormous sign with my face, and stepped into the cold night. Snowflakes caught in my hair. I pulled out my phone. The old text thread from my father still sat there. I opened it, read those cruel words one more time, and then smiled. They no longer held any power. I hit delete. As the car pulled away from the resort, leaving behind the glow and the tension, a deep peace settled over me. For years, I had thought I was the outsider in my own family. I had thought I had to choose between being true to myself and being loved. But the truth was simpler. I needed to love myself enough to set boundaries, to demand honesty, and to stop fitting into roles I never auditioned for. With that realization, even the icy road ahead felt bright. Tell me in the comments, have you ever had to stand your ground against your own family to protect your identity? And if you've dealt with something similar, share your story. You're not alone. Subscribe for more stories about standing your ground and reclaiming your life. Your support means the world to me. Until next time, know your worth and never let anyone edit you out of your own life.